Thank you, Joel.
Okay.
So our third speaker for today is a German Filipino based in the Philippines now, although he's born in and raised in Luxembourg. He's a former technology corporate business guy turned hydroponic enthusiast. He started his business Urban Greens in 2016 with a vision to bring hydroponic technology to urban centers, remote sites, and islands around the world. His scalable model and big vision is centered around turning underutilized, unused, and unmonetized spaces into profitable and high-end hydroponic farm setups to provide clean and high-value crops to hotels, restaurants, and bars. He has many years of international corporate experience and has previously built his own Android, the Android Wear, iOS, and Apple Watch trivia and language apps. The Philippines is his 11th country he has now lived in. He speaks English, German, French, Spanish, Luxembourgish, and Swiss German conversational in Japanese, and even Filipino, Tagalog, and basic in Mandarin Chinese. My friends, ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to present to you Ralph Becker. Ralph, please.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction there. Thank you, and thank you for my previous speakers, Professor Ang and Professor Joel. They really provided a framework of what it is that I will be talking about. Let me go ahead and share my screen here now.
Thank you, Ralph.
Is the audio okay? Right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. All right. So I'll be expanding further on the points that were raised by Dr. Joel and by Dr. Ang, and furthering and finding the real-life application that we have been using here in our urban farm setups in Manila. So I'll be talking a little bit about robotics, AI, machine vision, automation, and our version of it. It's become a very new topic that we are introducing farming with robotics and automation. So we're really reinventing farming, and some of the countries, as you've seen in the pictures of Professor Joel, he's been already talking to Japanese farms in back in 2007, but here in the Philippines, it hasn't picked up just as yet. Other countries in the US, in Europe, Israel is very leading in this technology, but we haven't caught up on this yet. But it is a topic that is very, very important, particularly because here in the Philippines, we are really hit by storms and typhoons and by calamities, which ravage our farm system. And agriculturally, we're really on the back heel, and we haven't spent a lot of investment into updating our farm technology. Fact is also that the Philippines have become the #1 net importer of rice in the world last year. So being a rice producing country and us actually teaching other countries how to grow rice, we are now the country that imports the highest volume of rice in the world. Just think about that, and for me that is very shocking, and it just represents the current state of agriculture in the Philippines, which could be improved. There are a lot of things that we cannot improve or cannot change, which is, first of all, we're starting to hit typhoon season here in the Philippines, right? There's not much we can do about it from our activities. Storms and typhoons will hit, and the next one is going to hit the Philippines very soon, and the effects that will have on agriculture or on the farms that are in the path of the typhoons will just be devastating, right? And on the other hand, the picture here in the middle is basically a snapshot of what you will probably find when you go out into the countryside of the Philippines. It's a it's a contemporary picture of the Philippine farm scene. So we're still tilling our lands and fields with tamaraws, with carabaos. We don't operate heavy machinery. So that also means that we do not manage to create consistent quality in our production line. The result of both leads us towards importing a high number of food here in the Philippines. We actually import more than a third of the food consumed here in the Philippines from abroad. This comes from countries like our neighboring countries, the big ones, you know them, China, Australia, New Zealand, but of course Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, and those likes. A lot of crops also coming from like soy and potatoes coming from the US, and even vegetables coming from Europe as well, such as high-end tomatoes, arugula, basil. A lot of that actually coming from Europe, which is quite shocking to me. So there's not much we can do about the storms and typhoons, which create the inconsistent quality, but we are now indoors, right? You are sitting indoors in your very protected space, and we have created protected spaces that protect us, human beings and our animals, even our cattle, from the outside elements, which is controlled indoor environments. It might be cold outside for those of you tuning in from the US, it might be raining outside, it might be dark outside. This does not matter, because we have the capacity to turn on aircon, we turn on the heater, we turn on the lights, we turn on the fans. We can control the environments that you and me are sitting in right now, right? But for farming, we basically still think back that farming is supposed to be natural, it's supposed to be outside, and that's where we leave it. But it will be ravaged by storms and typhoons coming in. And we're having this conversation now over internet, over our mobile devices, over laptops, and we're using 21st century technology in our day-to-day lives. As you said in the previous talks, we're aiming at robotics, we're looking at AI, machine vision, and all of that. But farming is still relegated to the 20th century, 19th century technology, and we haven't really updated or brought technology into the realm of farming in the Philippines, in most of the Philippines, right? And we are now, we have the capacity, as the previous speakers have outlined, to introduce modern technology into farming, be that robotics, be that AI, be that analytics, be that sensor technology. And this is something that I'll be touching upon, what we've been using in our company as well. And the result of us importing a lot of food costs a lot of carbon footprint, of course, but on top of that, it costs a lot of cost. So we are based, most of us are in the city centers, and we consume in the city centers as well. More and more people are conglomerating into the metropolitan area, and they say by 2050, about 70% of the world population will be living in urban city areas, right? But farming is still relegated to the outside, to the outskirts, and even to far lands away from the cities, like hundreds and hundreds of miles, which means that food needs to be transported in. What we then propose, and this is the concept of vertical urban farming, is that we bring food closer to the place of consumption. You might have heard the term food miles. We want to turn food miles literally into footsteps. We want to close the gap. We want to close the farm to table distance, and we want to make food accessible right here in the heart of the city. Now, how do we do this? Our company, Urban Greens, we turn unused, underutilized, unmonetized, and particularly abandoned spaces, such as this one here, an unused warehouse, an office space that is not used. We're turning those into money-earning, job-creating, food-growing, community-building, high-tech urban farms, such as this one here, right? And here's a couple of examples of some of the stuff that we've done. This is sort of a rooftop and a basement. We have several setups that we're now looking at converting warehouses into a space. So we actually manage to convert current existing spaces into urban farms. So why do we do this? The goal of urban vertical farming is to create the best environment to grow for our plants to grow. So best environment what does that mean? And this has been touched upon by Dr. Joel as well. It means that we create a protected environment, so protected from the outside calamities such as storms, typhoons, bugs, and other pests, with the best growing conditions. So that means lights, the nutrients that we touched upon, to create something, a produce that is very consistent, accurate, and efficient. Consistent means that we're not subdued to seasonality, so seasonal changes. We don't have winters here, but in states where you have winters, you can't grow in winter, right? You have to import. The east coast of the US imports all of their food during the winter times from the west coast of the US or from the Midlands, or from countries such as Mexico or South America, even further. The European countries, the Northern European countries particularly, they would import from the southern regions, Spain or the northern shores of Africa. We, on the other hand, we have storms and typhoons, and we import from other countries in and around our region. Accuracy also means that we can replicate the same consistent growth that we have done, and efficiency is all of this, but making it as price efficient as possible. This is for us as a company who work with real numbers and with costs and with overheads and with profit margins. We have to make sure that we don't plow in a lot of technology for the sake of technology and accuracy, but not creating any profitability for our company. Now, when we think robotics and urban farms, this is really what we're thinking of. Like there are certain robots out there that have started looking into robotic arms, tending the fields, looking at AI, and this is really the pinnacle of automated farming. But when we think about technology or updated technology, and how can we update our farms here in the Philippines in a simple manner without using high-tech robotics, then or such as this one here. Here we have systems from Iron Ox. They are a San Francisco-based company. Actually, a friend of mine is the CEO of the company, and we've met several times, and we've had different conversations about the efficiency of farming. And basically, in the U.S., labor is very expensive and not at the same price as here. So that's what led them to create systems like this one here. But here in the Philippines, when we think about how we can update farming straight away, it's something that we've neglected all along, which is as simple as a greenhouse. So the number of greenhouses here, or the acreage of greenhouses here in the Philippines, is really, really eclipsed by any other countries out there. So, for instance, Thailand has 15,000 acres covered in greenhouses such as this one. 15,000. The Philippines has 150. So, you know, we are subdued to all of these storms and typhoons, and greenhouses like this could protect us and could create longevity in our farm systems and operations. And yet we think that we don't need them. Why is this the case? Because all of these greenhouses and technology, they do require a large upfront investment, but we always think of, oh, this costs a lot of money, without thinking about the savings, the cost savings that we can have in the future. I don't know whether it's a very Filipino thing to look at cost versus long-time return. Okay. So I've created a little bit of a farm automation hierarchy. So these are the different levels of automation and robotics and technology that you can introduce into your farm. Starting right at manual and conventional farming as we know it. When we think about farming, we take care manually of the watering, the seeding, the harvesting, and even looking at the plants. So we have an agronomist looking at the plants, telling us what to do, how much nutrients to add, and so forth, right? Next level up is actually passive automation. So we add in timers, lights, and pumps that automate and that take some of the tasks that a normal farmhand would do. Third level up is we're starting to get a little bit more technical here, and this is when we start just monitoring. We monitor the status of our farm setups, of our water and our plants, and we do this by IoT sensors, by camera technology, and we can monitor. This is only a passive feedback of the nutrient level, the pH level, water condition, CO2 in the air, atmospheric temperature, water temperatures, and the likes. So those are the things that are pretty accessible. The next step, however, that's when it starts getting very interesting and a little bit more complicated and more costly as well, which is smart automation. So what do we do with the third level of information that we have generated through our IoT sensors? We feed them back into a smart automated system, which gives back, which then adjusts the nutrients, the water level, the water temperature, the air temperature. Think of it a little bit like an automated aircon, where you set the temperature, the room temperature that you want. So if you say you want your room at 26 degrees Celsius, if the air temperature would drop or would be going too high, the aircon would switch on and making sure that it constantly stays at the 26 degrees. Those are the things that automatic feedback loop and smart automation, it's the next level, one step up from pure monitoring. Now, on top of that, we can introduce, you're familiar with this, AI and machine vision. So this is really when we start looking at the plant physiology. How are the plants doing? And we basically use cameras to detect, are there bugs on the plants? Are there any deficiencies on the plants? And are the leaf tip burnt, for instance, or are they shriveled up a little bit? So that means calcium deficiency and so forth. So then that information will feed back into the smart automation system and then can release more calcium into the water. Next step up is the one that we showed before, and this is really the end goal of automated farms. And this is a fully automated robotic farm, a plant factory, so to speak. Some of the pictures that we have seen, really minimizing the input of a human being, and where everything, the planting, the harvesting, even the packaging is managed by robots. Now, there's pros and cons to this, right? And so pros particularly being around the cost and efficiency, right? So manual labor is very cheap and it's very abundant, particularly in this country. And we're looking at this from the perspective of the Philippines because this is where we operate, right? Conditions will be completely different if we were operating in Europe or in the US, because labor is not as cheap and it's not as abundant as here in the Philippines. That's something you need to always keep in mind. However, cheap labor or unskilled labor is always prone to error, and there's no real consistency in it, of course. The next level is cheap, low tech, and it's pretty easy to put in like automated manual analog timers. And you can even do Wi-Fi timers. They're pretty cheap to come by, but they have very limited function, but they can help you even a step further. So once we start getting into the realm of monitoring and IoT systems, that's when it becomes a little bit more expensive, but we get analytics out of it. Next step up is it's very accurate. Smart automation is very accurate, but it starts getting very, very expensive there. Machine vision is something that we're looking at, and we're debating whether it's whether there is an efficient way to do it or not. And I'll walk you through this later. And of course, high-scale urban farms and automated urban farms, they're very, very expensive. So this is really the scenario that we're looking at. So you have to trade off. And if obviously, if you run and operate a commercial company, cost is one of the things that really will drive your decision-making. Obviously, we would want a fully automated, operated robotic farm, but how much budget and money and ROI are we willing to take into account? Like the ROI for full farm is 10 years, maybe 20 years. But is that feasible for a company or a startup such as ours that we operate? So what is feasible? So the first 3 steps are very feasible for us, and that's actually what we do. Now, the next thing is like, okay, is there a hack or cheaper way how we can do smart automation? AI, machine vision, can we hack it in a way to make it accessible for us and even for you as someone who's looking into urban farming maybe or into agriculture, thinking about cost? The barriers of entry into urban farms is cost. And of course, the cost for a full factory is really prohibitive. So the end goal really, if this was the end goal, we're planting, harvesting, and packaging is highly scalable. Let's look at the pros and cons here. They're highly scalable. It's a highly scalable facility, but they take massive investment. The tech availability, honestly, in this country is not there yet. This might be something that is available in the US and in Europe, but for us here in the Philippines, even to think about, okay, let's create this robotic farm. Do we have the technology in-house? In-house meaning in the country. Or would we have to go and buy foreign technology from Japan, from the US, from Israel, from Germany, be it so? And is that actually in the interest of the country itself by buying in foreign technology, or is the interest of the Philippine country to develop this technology in-house in the Philippines with the scientists such as you and with industrial pioneers such as myself, and to create something like this here in the Philippines? Now, we've created urban farms all throughout the city. This is a demo farm that can actually be viewed from the outside, and it's at the Mine Museum here in BDC Taguig. It's in collaboration with the Bonifacio Art Foundation and the Mine Museum, which furthers all things that are science and technology and arts. So we're happy to be collaborating with them on all different projects. These systems here are fully they have passive automation. So what does that mean? We use timers, we use pumps, we have LED lights, as you can see here. These are the same red and blue lights that you saw in the previous from the previous speakers. The system it's pretty cheap still. I mean, the lights are expensive in a way. They cost about $40 one LED strip. So one level. So the total cost is about $2,500 just for the LED light. So when I say cheap, it's not that cheap, right? But this is the cost for light. And we built our own IoT system. How did we do that? We have guys that are good at Arduino and at Raspberry Pi, and all of these things can be built together. And we use this actually as our analytical tool. We get notifications on our mobile phone, and these are 2 extracts from our mobile phone. I just took screenshots of what it is that the information, and we shoot back information back and forth between the agronomist and our operations engineer, and we take decisions based on this. Now, machine vision is definitely something that we would want, but it is very expensive at this point, and robotics and high scalability are also very expensive. So we found a hack in order for us. Obviously, machine vision, automated machine vision, is the next step in our venture. But meanwhile, we found a way, and we call it the T system. And I want to introduce you to our system called T. T is actually not a robot or an AI. T is our agronomist, and she's on the left side, and she sits she was previously in the US working for a farm in Buffalo on cherry tomatoes and on strawberries, and now she's joining our team. She's currently in Leyte. And the way how we've hacked machine vision and AI is basically T has access to our remote cameras, and she then determines what the status is of the plants. We send her pictures of our plants as well, remote, like with our mobile phones. And then she will say like, oh, wow, these plants are potassium deficient, these plants are good, you need to add neem oil to these, etc., etc. So we've kind of hacked machine vision with a human factor in the back. The reason is because as a startup, this is actually the most cost-efficient way how to do these things, and it is actually really quite scalable. We don't need machine vision on a large scale at this point. So for us, this is how we hacked it. And the other thing is, how did we hack our robotics? So we have interns, we have very cheap labor working for us, but we tell them exactly what it is that they need to be doing. So the processes that these interns do are very highly automated. So we've created a standard operating procedure and an operations manual, and they just go through the motions like a robot and do exactly what it is. And in conjunction with our agronomist here in the back end, she can supervise them remotely. So that's our robotics and machine vision, how we have hacked it for now. Because labor is a lot cheaper here in the Philippines, this makes a lot of sense from a commercial standpoint of view, and this is very scalable for us at this point right now, before we get into full automation and robotics as well. Is this technology accessible? So this is the current state of urban farming. If you remember back then, when you had a printer, it was something you had to go to print shop, or at university you're printing, there was one print room, right? Or your Nespresso or your cafe latte needed to be done by a very skilled barista, and you had to go to a coffee place in order to get that done. Nowadays, this is very accessible to all of you. We have laser printers at home. We can make our latte macchiato at home. So we have come far away, and this is due to the sensor technology, and this is due to the technology that we've been using. The current state of urban farming and its accessibility is currently relegated to enthusiasts who want to do it in their backyard, and they use DIY, put together projects, or really more massive or well-funded urban farms. But really what we want to get to, and this is the task that we are facing, and together, it's only together with you, the science community and the technology community, the engineering community here, together in conjunction with commercial players such as ourselves, where we need to create urban farm objects that make farming more accessible to everyone. This is so important, particularly now. Urban farming is something that we get asked all the time, and some of you have been planting over COVID, I'm sure, their own plants. This has really shown how vulnerable our food supply system is. Urban farming will be something that will be of more importance going forward in the future. And this concludes my talk. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please contact me directly or offline through my contact details here below. And if you have, I'm happy for any collaborations as well, and give you more information about how we do all things urban farming here in the Philippines. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Ralph. And definitely, this is one issue that address COVID-19 problems about food security. Although this is not only for COVID-19, this is the future. So we start collaborating. So hopefully this is not the end of our discussions. And I'm sure the audience will ask questions. So please throw your questions in the chat box, and I'm sure Ralph will answer that. Thank you. So